People talk about a song, a specific song. They say it was a bridge between two kings, a peace offering, a way of saying, I see you, I remember. The story goes that this one song, a cover version, was what repaired the friendship between Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash. It's a nice story, it feels right, but things are rarely that simple. Their story wasn't about a break that needed fixing. It was about a bond that was forged in fire and then stretched across a universe of fame, fortune, and personal demons. To understand the song, you have to understand the silence that came before it. You have to go back to the beginning. It all started in a small studio in Memphis. Sun Records, 706 Union Avenue. It wasn't much to look at, but it was a place where lightning was being caught in a bottle over and over again. The man holding the bottle was Sam Phillips. Sam wasn't just looking for a good singer. He was looking for a sound. Something new, something that blended the blues he loved with the country music he knew. He was looking for someone who could connect with both black and white audiences. He was, as the legend goes, looking for a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel. First came Elvis. He was a truck driver, shy, polite, but with a fire inside him. When Elvis sang, something happened. He didn't just sing the notes, he inhabited the song. He moved in a way people hadn't seen before. It was dangerous. It was exciting. It was the birth of rock and roll. Sam Phillips knew he had found it. Elvis recorded That's All Right in 1954, and the world tilted on its axis. He was a sensation, a phenomenon. Not long after, another young man walked into Sun. He was different from Elvis, darker, more intense. He carried himself with a solemn gravity. His name was John R. Cash. He'd just gotten out of the Air Force. He sold appliances door to door. He came in wanting to sing gospel music. Sam Phillips wasn't interested. He told him to go home and sin a little, then come back with a song he could feel. So Cash came back. He came back with songs about trains and prisons and love that was hard-won. His voice was not pretty. It was a force of nature. A deep baritone that sounded like it came from the earth itself. It was flawed and real. It was the sound of truth. So now you have these two forces in the same small space. Elvis, the supernova of charisma and sexuality, and Cash, the brooding poet of the common man. They weren't best friends who hung out every night. Their personalities were too different for that. Elvis was a peacock, dazzling and bright. Cash was a storm cloud, full of thunder and shadow. But there was a deep unspoken respect. They were brothers in arms in a musical revolution. They came from the same dirt. Both were poor boys from the South. Both were raised on gospel music in the church. That music was in their bones. It was their foundation. They saw each other at the studio. They played on the same bills in the early days, driving through the dusty roads of the South in packed cars, playing tiny halls and school auditoriums. They were part of a pack. Carl Perkins was there. Jerry Lee Lewis, the wild man, would soon join them. They were the Sun Records crew. They were inventing a new language together. There's a famous picture from December 4th, 1956. It's called the $1 Million Quartet. It's Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash, all gathered around a piano at Sun Studio. Elvis had already left Sun for the major label RCA. He was a huge star by then, a national figure. He just dropped by the studio to visit. What followed was an impromptu jam session. They sang gospel hymns, they sang old country songs, they sang each other's hits. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered joy and camaraderie. It captures the spirit of that time. They were young men on top of the world, bound by a shared, explosive talent. In that room, they were equals, they were peers, but that moment was an ending as much as it was a beginning. It was the last time they would all be together like that. The paths they were on were already starting to diverge, and the gap would only grow wider. This is where the idea of a broken friendship comes from. But it wasn't a fight. It wasn't a betrayal. It was just life. It was business. The big split started when Elvis left Sun. Sam Phillips sold his contract to RCA for $35,000. It was an astronomical sum at the time. Sam needed the money to keep his small label afloat, but it changed everything for Elvis. He was no longer a regional sensation. He was a global commodity. His new manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was a master marketer. He saw Elvis not just as a singer, but as a brand. The Colonel put Elvis on national television. He put him in movies, he put his face on lunchboxes and cheap guitars. Elvis became an icon, but he also became a prisoner. The raw, dangerous energy of his Sun Records was sanded down. It was polished for mass consumption. He was still Elvis, he still had the voice and the magic, but he was now surrounded by an army of handlers and yes men. He was isolated, he lived in a bubble of fame that few people could ever comprehend. His connection to the world he came from, the world of dusty roads and small-time gigs, began to fade. Johnny Cash, meanwhile, stayed at Sun for a while longer. He kept scoring hits. He was becoming a major star in the country music world. He eventually left Sun too, for Columbia Records. But his journey was different. He didn't go to Hollywood. He didn't try to become a sanitized pop star. He leaned into his identity. He became the Man in Black. He wrote songs about sin and redemption, about murder and regret. His music was for the downtrodden, the forgotten, the people in prisons. And while Elvis was living in his gilded cage, Cash was building his own prison out of pills. He got heavily addicted to amphetamines and barbiturates. His life started to spiral out of control. He was missing shows, getting arrested, and his marriage was falling apart. He was living the dark life he sang about in his songs. He was walking a tightrope over a canyon, and everyone was watching. This is the great divergence. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was living a life of unimaginable fame and luxury, but he was artistically and personally isolated. Johnny Cash, the Man in Black, was a critical darling and a hero to many, but he was battling his own self-destructive demons in public. They were living in two completely different worlds. They were no longer peers jamming around a piano. They were two distant stars, each with their own powerful gravity. Did they hate each other? No, there's no evidence of that. But there was a professional rivalry for sure, and maybe a little bit of envy from both sides. Cash probably looked at Elvis's success and wondered what if. He once admitted that he was jealous of Elvis at the beginning. Who wouldn't be? Elvis had it all, and Elvis, trapped in Hollywood making silly movies, probably looked at Cash's authenticity and artistic freedom with a certain longing. Cash was playing for prisoners at Folsom. Elvis was singing to a stuffed dog in a movie. He knew what he had given up. They still had contact, but it was sporadic. They would call each other late at night sometimes. They understood each other in a way no one else could. They were the only two people who knew what it was like to be Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley. They knew the pressure. They knew the loneliness. They talked about music. They talked about God. Elvis, especially in his later years, was deeply spiritual. He always returned to the gospel music of his youth. It was his anchor, and that was something he and John still had in common. It was their deepest connection. So where does the song fit into all of this? The song in question is a masterpiece of songwriting. It's simple but profound. It has a steady hypnotic rhythm, like a train rolling down the tracks. The lyrics are a pledge of devotion, a promise of fidelity in a world full of temptation. It's a man drawing a line in the sand and vowing to stay true. It's a song that Johnny Cash wrote for his first wife, Vivian. He wrote it backstage at a show in Texas, trying to reassure her of his love while he was on the road, surrounded by a lifestyle that could destroy a marriage. The irony, of course, is that he didn't always live up to that promise, but the song itself was pure. It was an ideal. It was a prayer. When Elvis performed this song, it wasn't a major studio release. You won't find it on his big famous albums. He did it live, on stage. It was usually in the 1960s and 70s, during his Vegas years. He would often do it as part of a medley, or just as an impromptu moment. He'd kick into that famous rhythm, drop his voice low, and sing that pledge of loyalty. The people who believe this song repaired their friendship, see it as a public message. And Elvis, on the biggest stage in the world, was tipping his hat to his old friend from Sun Records. He was acknowledging Cash's genius as a songwriter. He was saying, "I remember where we came from. I still respect your work." In this view, the song is an olive branch, a way of bridging the vast gulf that had opened up between them. And in a way, they're not wrong. It was a sign of respect. Elvis didn't have to sing that song. He had hundreds of his own hits. By choosing to sing a Johnny Cash song, he was making a statement. He was paying homage. It was a nod from one king to another. It was a reminder to the audience and maybe to himself of the raw, authentic music that had started it all. He was connecting back to his roots. But to say it repaired, their friendship implies there was something broken. And that's the part of the story that doesn't quite hold up. Their friendship wasn't broken like a shattered plate. It was more like a rope that had been stretched thin over a great distance. It was still connected, but there was a lot of space between the two ends. The calls were less frequent. The visits were rare. Their lives were just too different. The song wasn't a magical fix. It was a symptom of the respect that had always been there, even when they were worlds apart. Not a repair. The real foundation of their relationship wasn't built on a single song. It was built on their shared past. It was built on the sweat and hope of Sun Studio. It was built on their common love for gospel music. There's a story about June Carter, who would become Johnny's second wife. In the early days, she toured with Elvis. She saw his rise firsthand. She said Elvis used to confide in her, talk to her about his fears and his faith. Later, when Johnny was at his lowest point with his addiction, June was the one who helped save him. Her love and her faith were his rock. The fact that both men were so close to the same strong spiritual woman says a lot about their shared values, even if they express them in different ways. As the years went on, their paths became even more starkly different. Cash got clean. He found redemption with June. His career was revitalized. He became an elder statesman of American music, a figure of immense moral authority. He had stared into the abyss and survived. His voice now carried the weight of that survival. He had earned his gravitas. Elvis, on the other hand, sank deeper into his isolation. The Vegas years were lucrative, but they were a trap. He was performing a caricature of his younger self. He was bloated, medicated, and surrounded by people who couldn't or wouldn't say no to him. He was a king in a lonely castle, slowly fading away. The fire that had once lit up the world was being smothered by prescription pills and peanut butter and banana sandwiches. Johnny Cash saw what was happening. He worried about Elvis. He knew the pressures. He knew the temptations of the road. He knew the emptiness that could follow a show when you're alone in a hotel room. He once said that he understood Elvis's situation perfectly. He knew that Elvis was trapped and that he probably didn't know who to trust. When Elvis died in 1977, it hit Cash hard. He didn't just see the death of a fellow star. He saw the death of a brother. A man who had started in the same place he did, who had dreamed the same dreams. He saw a man who had been consumed by the very thing they had both chased. Cash had been lucky. He had June, he had his faith, he had pulled back from the brink, Elvis hadn't. So, let's go back to the song. Did Elvis singing it fix everything? No, because nothing was truly broken. It was just distant. What the song really represents is the enduring thread of connection that ran through their entire lives. It was Elvis in his sequin jumpsuit reaching back in time to that small room in Memphis. He was singing a song written by a man he respected, a man who represented a kind of authenticity that Elvis himself had perhaps lost. It was a moment of tribute. Think of it this way. Imagine two friends who grow up together. They're inseparable, then they go to different colleges, get different jobs, and move to different cities. They don't talk every day. They might go years without seeing each other. But one day, one of them's giving a speech, and he tells a story from their childhood. A story only the two of them would truly understand. Is he repairing the friendship? No. He's honoring it. He's showing that no matter how much time has passed or how much distance is between them, that original bond is still there. It's still part of who he is. That's what Elvis was doing when he sang that song. He was honoring the bond. He was remembering the $1 Million Quartet. He was remembering the shared dream. He was remembering when they were just two poor boys from the South who wanted to sing. The friendship between Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash is not a simple story with a neat ending. It's a complex tapestry woven with threads of rivalry, respect, religion, and the shared burden of fame. They were mirror images of each other in some ways. Two sides of the same coin. The light and the shadow, the pop idol and the outlaw poet, both became kings of their own domains. Their story is a powerful reminder of how life can pull people in different directions. But it's also a story about how the foundations we build in our youth can endure. The real bridge between them wasn't a song, it was Sam Phillips' little studio. It was the gospel hymns they sang as boys. It was the shared understanding of a life that no one else could possibly imagine. The idea that a single cover song can magically heal a rift is a romantic notion. It makes for a good headline, it's the kind of legend the fans love to tell. But the truth is more profound. The truth is that their friendship didn't need a grand gesture of repair because it was never truly severed. It was a constant, a baseline of mutual respect that existed beneath all the noise of their incredible lives. Elvis singing a song about walking a straight line at a time when his own life was anything but is a beautiful and poignant moment. It's a glimpse of the man behind the icon, remembering the friend who walked a different, darker, and perhaps more honest path. The song people talk about, the one with the steady beat and the promise of devotion, was Johnny Cash's own masterpiece. The song was I Walk the Line.